what?
This meeting is being recorded.
As opposed to what might think of a British idea of the private individual. And I've seen debates in the local philosophy journal between someone who will say Ubuntu is a universal norm and others who say it's just a cultural preference. In order to show that Ubuntu is an idea which is important beyond African culture, one has to show that one has to show that human freedom develops necessarily through others. In other words, there's a direct proportionality between your individual freedom and relatedness to others rather than an indirect freedom, indirect proportionality. In other words, one has to counter the idea that the more you are influenced from the outside, the less free you are, the less agency you have. This is a typical modern European idea, specifically Immanuel Kant, German philosopher who argues for the prime value of human autonomy, and he takes autonomy directly opposed to heteronomy. Heteronomy means you are influenced from the outside. Autonomy, you influence just by yourself. The way he solves this problem is to say there's a realm of autonomy which is different to the ordinary realm of human life. It's the realm of freedom, it's the realm of spirit. But this is unhelpful because it's a typical dualist supposed solution to this. But I just want to point out the dangers of this dualist picture, which is that it can be manipulated. By which I mean that if you take spirit as something just different to the workings of our ordinary world, it can be abused, and it is abused by charlatan religious prophets, in particular, well known in this part of the world. I'm just thinking of one particular so-called spiritual leader, Prophet Bushiri, who is still trying to be extradited back to this country from Malawi on charges of fraud. But the story is about how he can. What can be abused is people's aspirations towards more spirituality. So what one has to do is put spirit back into the ordinary world. And the way I'm looking to do that is through the ideas associated with Hegel. Because Hegel has this idea that you develop in a process of self-objectification and then identification with that self-objectification. You become what you are through expressing something in the world external to you. An example would be, for example, getting married. So getting married, you project yourself into something new, and then you reintegrate your new self as a husband or wife as your new identity. And this is an example of becoming something new. So it's an example of transcendence. You've transcended your first self and become a different self. Well, okay. So for Hegel, being is becoming. Nevertheless, for Hegel, who's very influential in subsequent studies on the social and psychological conditions for human living, in other words, not just taking a dualist perspective, but for Hegel, he does not he does not hold on to the classical idea of individual freedom or spirituality. Okay, and you can see it in subsequent developments of Hegel, in Karl Marx, who just thinks individual subjectivity is simply a reflection of social and economic circumstances, or even in Heidegger, who doesn't manage, I think, to retain the idea of individual freedom, and the individual becomes more, the being with the Mitsein becomes more like a crowd. And then in Jean-Paul Sartre, who famously sees other people as the problem, and human love as an attempt to manipulate the other person out of their freedom. So the tradition that we have, which I'm trying to build on, of becoming what you are through self-expressiveness, through self-objectification, in this twofold process. You externalize yourself, and then you identify yourself with your externalization. So, yeah. So so I've said a lot. Let me get back to the African traditional ideas, starting with basically two ideas that I'm developing. The one is the idea of Ubuntu. It's an ethical idea, and the other is the idea of spirit. And maybe begin with the idea of spirit, because it's very important in understanding the Ubuntu idea. But it needs developing, put it that way. So I'm using a Zulu word, isitunzi, but also in the other major Southern African language, which is Sesotho, seriti. Both of these words literally means shadow, but it means the shadow you cast indicates your power, how big your shadow is. So it moves into the idea of force, the force you have that you cast onto the world. And the idea is that the universe is a network of these forces, each one influencing the other one, running right through the world, from higher beings right through humans and animals and plants. So there is this idea of a certain transcendence that's internal to the universe. So it's basically, it's not a dualist idea, because it's not opposed to your ordinary life. So the idea of spirit is useful to speak to the problem I've identified with Ubuntu. So Ubuntu which, as I say, means humanness or human worthiness. It's a normative, it's descriptive and normative. You have to become what you are. There's a certain fullness of being idea in Ubuntu. And it's linked very often to the proverb, which is in Zulu, it's umuntu, ubuntu, ungabantu. And in the other major Southern African language, the Sotho, it's mutu kimutu, kabatu babang, which means, both of them mean a person is a person through other persons. Popularized actually the saying by Bishop Desmond Tutu. So that's it's who made it into this sort of normative idea, and it's actually written into the South African Constitution, alongside, without resolving it, a very individual human rights based constitution. So sort of an unresolved juxtaposition of these two ideas. Human rights idea, obviously coming from the European tradition of individual freedom. Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to link these two traditions. Let me just give you some more idea about the African traditional idea. I'm quoting now. Okay, so I'm quoting now from one of the pioneers of the bringing to the contemporary world the traditional African ideas. Placide Tempels, who's a Belgian missionary, but he puts it like this: the Bantu cannot be a lone being. It's not a good enough synonym to say that he is a social being. No, he feels and knows himself to be a vital force. He's taking the idea from the French philosopher Bergson about the force vitale running through the universe. At this very time, to be in intimate and personal relationship with other forces, acting above him and below him in the hierarchy of forces. He knows himself to be a vital force, even now influencing some forces and being influenced by others. So, I think he's describing it well. It fits in with a traditional African idea of a natural hierarchy. The idea, it's very powerful that some people are just, if you like, bigger than others. And it's something you have to acknowledge. You learn from others who are bigger than you. And in turn, it's your obligation to influence others who are less than you. It's very ingrained in traditional African culture. A child will, for example, refer to any adult male in their environment as father. Ntate, in Sesotho, Ntate means father, and there's no difference between saying Mr. and saying father. And the father in turn will see it as his obligation to care for any child. It's that sort of interrelationship. So for example, it fits in with the Ubuntu idea. In Zulu, you'll say sawubona, good morning, but it actually literally means I see you, I recognize you. And in Sesotho, you'll say dumela, ntari, dumela me, good morning, father, good morning, mother. But dumela actually means I agree. So your first reaction to meeting the other person is to say, we agree. And dumela also means I believe. So it's the first word in the Christian creed that people say during the Sunday service. Kia dumela, I believe. So it's all of this is linked. You agree, you trust, you believe before you start to disagree. So that's the first. It's the default position towards the other person. Is the solidarity, if you like. So I think there's definitely something of value in the culture that can complement the individual value of freedom. Yeah. On the other hand, if you look at the practice, South Africa, for example, is today experiencing a huge wave of xenophobia towards people from other countries in Africa. It's got to do with economic stringent circumstances and accusations, but it also goes against completely the idea of Ubuntu, which contains the idea of hospitality and generosity and tolerance. So there you go. And I mean, another factor is, of course, South Africa's divisive past, the racial classification, which continues to this day, that on every official form, you have to say which racial group you belong to. It continues to this day. It's not as if that has disappeared. You have to say, are you white? Are you African? Are you colored, which means mixed race? Or are you Asian, which means basically of Indian origin? And this again is contrary to the Ubuntu idea, but there you go. Things are not always that coherent. Okay, so I've tried to sketch something of a problem, and I want to say something about the notion of spirituality and immateriality. So the immateriality is, I think it's a key notion if one's going to bring in the idea of spirituality into the contemporary context, because the default position in science is that everything is determined, so that if you identify what forces are operating, you've identified the consequences. So you can speak about the billiard ball metaphor, that if the billiard cue hits the billiard ball at a certain angle, the billiard ball itself has no agency. It simply moves in the direction that it's caused to move in. And I know this is not the contemporary view of science or even of physics. Nevertheless, it's a sort of imaginative, it plays an imaginative role. And because a lot of people think the alternative is some sort of dualism, where you simply say alongside this there is spirit or the soul. Because of that and the implausibility of that, people think there's a default reductionism or determinism. So this is unhelpful, because then it it goes back to the idea of, well, why should I promote the idea of Ubuntu? If the idea of Ubuntu then is going to be constrictive, it will diminish my freedom as an individual. And in fact, it is sometimes taken like that. Also, if you think, I mean, any culture has negative parts to it, including the Ubuntu culture. And you find students at university, African students, in particular women, saying they want to reject Ubuntu in favor of individual freedom. And you can see their point to the extent that it's operating in a restrictive way. You know, speak about the hierarchy and so on. Right. Now, so we need to develop in a more sophisticated way to have a what I would call if it's going to take its place in our traditions of normativity. Thomas Aquinas, following Aristotle, had a very easy or clear idea of the immateriality of simply an argument which he has in the Summa Theologiae. Prima pars, question 75, if you follow that sort of thing. Simply that because we can know things as they are, and to say we can't is to contradict yourself. Because we as they are, it must mean that the organ is not material. If the organ of knowing was material, then that material framing of what we think we know would bias our understanding of the world. So that if you see through a green glass, everything out there looks green. But everything material is colored in some way. So the organ of understanding must be non-material. I'm not explaining this in a very sophisticated way. Nevertheless, that's basically his explanation of the immaterial dimension to the human being. Okay, let me mention someone who has been very influential in this debate, the American philosopher Thomas Nagel. Thomas Nagel wrote an essay on called "What It's Like to Be a Bat," and you could extend that to any animal life. For example, the fly on your computer screen. What it's like to be the fly. What perspective do they see? And Nagel's position is we can't get there through a scientific explanation. The more the scientific explanation is objective, the less you get to what it's like to be a bat. So that's a subjective fact of life, that there's always something that it's like to be. So, for example, we can speak about a scientific explanation of water in terms of 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen molecule, H2O, but that doesn't capture what it's like to feel the water, to feel the wetness. It doesn't capture that, but nevertheless, that's a reality. So Nagel has developed these ideas in all sorts of ways, but he wrote a book some years ago called Mind and Cosmos. So his idea is that any reductionism, reducing reality to the scientific explanation, is going to fail. It's not coherent. He doesn't really develop a positive alternative, however. He doesn't really say it. It remains in a sort of dualist vacuum, if you like. Even though I don't think he wants to be a dualist, but it sort of seems as if there are two realities: your subjective reality and then the scientific reality. But okay, so I'm okay. Well, I'm saying a lot of different things, but I've got two ideas that I'm trying to work out or offer explanations for. The first idea is building on Nagel's distrust of any reductionism, is to try and build on the idea through what we've spoken about with Hegel and reality being a process of self-objectification and then self reintegration. That means for Hegel, reality is a process of becoming something. It's a process of transcendence. So that means that you've got the idea of transcendence or spirit in your ordinary world, if you like, your material world, but you can just say in your ordinary world. You're not bringing in something supernatural. So I want to develop that to help someone like Nagel, who does not like reductionism or determinism. And I think one can. Okay, and just hold on to that because I'm going to speak a little bit about that. But the other main idea is developing a philosophical psychology which can show how your personal freedom is enhanced and not the reverse through the influence, beneficial influence of what's other than you, in particular other persons. And a South African philosopher has developed this at great length in a thesis called Intersubjectivity and Spirituality, which was never published, but he summarized the ideas in various books, including a book called Ubuntu, an ethic for a new South Africa. His name was Augustin Schutt. So I'm developing some of his ideas on this intersubjective determination of individual freedom, enhancement of personal growth. So yeah, I'm juggling with these two balls, which is difficult to keep both in mind. The first one is speaking about how transcendence or spirit runs through the cosmos. And the second one is this philosophical psychology, which is important to, which is the idea of Ubuntu, of Umuntu Ngumuntu Gabantu, you are through others. It is that idea, but it's developed by the use of philosophical psychology. Okay, maybe I speak about the second one, which is easier, briefly. So the idea is, and I'm going to take a simple example of a mother and a newborn, and the emergence of self-consciousness in the newborn, the neonate, or the infant. Studies have shown that if the newborn is hospitalized, in other words, there is no mother, there's a nurse, the development of self-awareness will be retarded, even though the newborn is perfectly well looked after. So the studies then show how the newborn has a natural need to be affirmed as important, or something like that, that the newborn can pick up the mother's delight in the child, and somehow that, and develop self-awareness, which wasn't there before. So that moment of very difficult to capture, but the moment of transition from not having self-awareness to having self-awareness is key to this sort of analysis. The mother delights in the child, and through the mother's imagination, the mother sees the child, what the child can become. Okay, and the idea is that this actually, contrary to Kant's idea of autonomy, the importance of the other, or the beneficial other, continues in the growth of self-knowledge and self-determination. So you can speak about the guru influencing. Okay, so I'm not going to develop this, but that's the idea. So important, I think, is to bring that forward, that unpacking, if you like, of the idea of a person becoming free through others. The other target of my inquiry is a general idea of transcendence or spirit, or transcendence or spirit in the cosmos, in the world. And that is a struggle to introduce alongside what we can call the classical view of science, which is the view of laws determining what happens. Alongside that, to develop the idea that actually what we now understand is science does not describe, scientific laws do not describe reality. Scientific laws apply to reality. And we have to make a judgment to what extent, in any particular case, those laws, they're always abstract, to what extent they do apply or do not apply. So science, for example, silly example, do not give any explanation of why Lamine Yamal scores a goal against Atletico Madrid in the Champions Cup in 2026. But that fact can be made intelligible. But the scientific laws do not give intelligibility to that. So alongside the scientific laws, we've got statistical science, science of probability, and that inquiry gives intelligibility to everything that the classical laws of science do not make sense of. The intelligibility is phrased in terms of probability fractions, and you can speak about alongside the scientific laws, there's always the issues of statistical probability. They leave a residue, the scientific laws, which are unexplained by those scientific laws, but they can be assigned a probability fraction to make sense of that. And given, if it's a real probability fraction, given long enough periods of time or instances, it will occur in accordance with that probability fraction. Okay. If you combine these two, you do get some idea that something that you can always have a, if you like, a higher explanatory framework, so that you can have independent sciences of not just physics, but chemistry and biology. And I'm going up the scale here, and psychology, and if you like, ethics. Each one can be an independent explanatory frame, independent of the other. Of course, for the chemical explanations to work, you need the physical, or for the psychological to work, you need the chemicals. You need in Lamine Yamal's body, you need those chemical reactions to be occurring. So he won't score the goal without that, but those do not determine him scoring the goal. Okay, so in a way, what I'm saying is that you can give a sort of science, philosophy of science, which allows this higher intelligibility. In particular, it allows transcendence. I've said far too much, and that's where I'm going to leave it. I hope it makes some sense. If it doesn't, it's okay as well. Do I have an audience? Can't hear you.
Great, Professor. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
It's indeed a very complex presentation because you are putting together two understandings of the spirituality, intersubjectivity, and world cosmos.
Yes.
Of course, I think in South Africa is the very place of meeting these two views, because the people are trained in European way of understanding reality, and they are meeting the local African vision of reality and immateriality. And this is very interesting because you are able to explain through our European way of explaining, to express this how to say, where the things are united or there is a connection, and where it is not. I think South Africa is it's a very interesting area for this spatial meeting of very different way of explaining. Yes, and it seems that we have to learn through our way of explaining, because it's our way as Europeans or European mind we have to understand the other and to learn. I think that the most important thing is to learn. And I'm really fascinated with this way of Ubuntu, because the others they are able to grow you. The others are able to bring you to what you should be. No, what I understand, and maybe this is also for to overcome our individualistic way of being, because it's selfish and we cannot reach a progress. Now, this is the problem of progress. How you can reach something beyond your status? No, and I think this is the crisis. This is the crisis of the modern world, of the Western world. The crisis is related with this, uh, individualistic blockage, because you are caged in your in your frame, and you are somehow you are not able to progress. Thank you for your great presentation. We are opening the floor for questions, comments, and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Giddy, for the presentation. When I was a master's student, we had a class which is called conflict transformation with Thomas Porter. Maybe you've known him. He was a good teacher of mine and had a good effect on my life. And with him, I was introduced to Ubuntu theology, and it was a very effective teaching for conflict transformation, because the understanding of society was so similar to my understanding of society in a Turkish Islamic tradition. And that was, I'm quoting from Desmond Tutu, that I am because we are. So it was a reflection that an individual person is not solely an entity. It was a part of a broader society, and therefore, when we talk about a specific person, for example, when we say, okay, this is Patrick, but we are not talking about Patrick alone, but we are talking about Patrick, who is a part of, let's say, a church community, a part of Cape Town, and in a macro level, a part of South Africa. So what do you think about using this Ubuntu theology in conflict transformation and your topic? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Ahmed. I haven't thought about this. I know Desmond Tutu, he did use it in trying to. He was instrumental in bringing about the idea of reconciliation. So yes, I think in the idea of Ubuntu, you do have this idea, which I didn't develop, but you can develop it. I just looked at mother-child intersubjective transactions. But you can develop that into how persons grow and how persons come into mutuality of recognition, and definitely that there's a sort of a reason for saying you need to go out of yourself. Okay, basically the idea is that unless you are affirmed by the other, you can't affirm them. You don't have the psychological capacity. And that's my explanation of the xenophobia in South Africa. Is if you have persons who are not being affirmed, they don't have a job, they don't have a proper income, they are not in a position to act out generosity and tolerance and acceptance. So the upshot is the idea you actually need moral effort in order to bring about reduction of conflict, or the sort of default position of people like that is to propagate some prejudice against, identify the other group as the problem, and we know how that happens all over the world. You identify some group. In South Africa, it's often what they call unregistered aliens. Yeah, but yes, it might be the case that you do have many people from the other parts of Africa in South Africa looking for a better life, and maybe they are unregistered. Nevertheless, it's a form of irrational prejudice. That's so. The Ubuntu idea is that you flourish by acting out attitudes of generosity and acceptance. But so I know Tutu has used that. If that's yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah. So we are looking for questions from the other participants.
Thank you for presentation, Patrice and Ben too. I have a question, but it's not about this presentation, or it can be, I don't know. They have a different ideas of this Ubuntu. It's about also you said, as I correctly remember, their human rights come from Europe. It's about the colonial period or not? I don't know. It's maybe come from that.
Sorry, was that a question? I didn't understand.
Okay. If I correctly remember, you said their human rights come from Europe, right? Am I right? It's about the colonial period. It's also human rights come from, and it's developing is from Europe. I don't know.
Okay. I'm not sure. I think there's obviously in the European tradition the idea of human rights as an ideal, and then there's the practice. So I think it's an colonialism is ambivalent historical phenomenon. If that's what you're getting at, colonialism brought writing to Southern Africa. I know my great grandfather was a missionary from England in South Africa, and he did bring a printing press, and he brought writing to write down the local language, which was he was involved in among Basotho people in the language of Sesotho. So yeah, and yeah, I would identify Europe with a tradition of individual freedom and human rights. But in practice, of course, that is something different. And that's what's usually called colonialism in a negative sense.
Yes, it's a very interesting story about this overlapping two mind frames, no, in the same area. Yeah, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. Intersubjectivity, it means as much interculturality, the meeting of two way of perceiving yourself in reality. And yeah, it's very interesting to learn from this experience. So yes, please. Any other questions, comments?
I mean, if I can just say, philosophers do abstract and they do simplify. Somebody can say, well, in African traditional culture, there was always individual freedom, of course. And you can say in European culture, there was always the idea of living through others. So it's a question of emphasis. That's really,
Yeah.
and as a philosopher, I like abstracting and proposing. Yes, it's an abstract idea. It's fine, but then you have to figure out how to apply it and to what extent to apply it. But I find it useful. These are useful tools to bring out. I can admit it. It's an aspect of the culture. You're not describing the whole culture. That's impossible.
What is important in this, in our way of abstracting, yes, it's the kind of hermeneutics we are making now, trying to understand the other culture, because the other culture, like Ubuntu, like Aboriginals from Australia, we had lecture with John O'Zolins on this. They don't care about hermeneutics, about explaining or expressing to the other culture, because they even probably they have no interest and no idea of something like this European mindset. So this possibility to interpret is coming from the Western philosophy, from this ability to do a kind of abstraction, and this is one reason for our institute to have this project on lectures, because we can find commonalities, or what are the main aspects that this kind of hermeneutics can extract from different cultural areas. And we had very interesting approaches on even Jove Aguas from the Philippines had something very interesting about houses, the way they are using housing as a fundamental aspect of the Filipino culture. And yes, we have this ability to interpret. I think this is probably the most important acquisition of the philosophical tradition in the Western, in Europe. But of course, there are limits here, and that abstraction means means more or less the kind of reductionist attitude. But it works. No, it works more or less. You said something about the new developments in the recent philosophy about regaining the complexity. I think what we are doing now is this attempt to regain the complexity of the cultural areas around the world, and to find how people are connecting with reality, with nature, with self in different areas. And this is the point. We have to learn. Yeah.
If I can just add something to that, we recently had the annual Philosophy Society conference in South Africa. It was here in Cape Town, and I've been going to these on and off for quite some years, and it's interesting how things have changed. In particular, it relates to what you are saying there, that philosophy is much more concrete and cultural than it used to be, at least from the example of this conference. The philosophical topics used to be those ones that were set out at the University of Oxford, or by the German contemporary philosophers. But now, partly because of the influence of bringing in African traditional culture to debate, things have changed, and people now bring in all sorts of cultural frameworks into philosophical debate. So there was one paper I went to on Krishna, on the Bhagavad Gita, which they're trying to link it to Hemingway. And another presentation by some delegates from Kuwait on medieval Islamic thinking. Yes, and then some Catholic priests were there. In each case, they are not avoiding bringing in the religious tradition, and I think it's good to have that sort of interrogation, but it is philosophy, so all questions are well. It's not theology. Yeah. Anyway, just an example that supports, I think, what you're saying.
Yes, indeed. It's an interesting evolution, and yes, we need to recover something we missed. The other minds, the outer cultural backgrounds and minds, and what we can learn from them is very important, I think, because we have a kind of crisis now related with the way of being, way of living, and this is the problem. So we have to extend somehow our connections with the others and with the nature. Otherwise, will be a very difficult time for our future. No, individualistic way of being, it's impossible at some point.
Yes, and I mean the other is see in the world is a revert to fundamentalism, which is always taking out the worst of the particular tradition and making it into some absolute. Yeah. So without proper dialogue, people do. They become rigid in their own their own particular tradition.
Yeah. Also, for geopolitics is now geocultural politics is now a very important topic, because otherwise you cannot understand the other mind, and you can get a kind of clash with him, conflict. How you can we have in our journal, a Texas Journal for Research and Values and Philosophy, this topic, how you can resolve the tension, how you can bring peace. It's not possible without some very profound understanding, cultural and spiritual understanding of the other's culture. Spirituality can be the link, can be the mediation, but we have to do this kind of hermeneutics. The hermeneutics provided by philosophy, we have to be trained as philosophers and to be able to reach this midpoints between cultural tradition. And I think this is critical today. We are looking for this development of the Institute. Yes, thank you. If there are any other comments or questions?
I have a question also, Domnari. Sorry, I don't understand that. The idea of coming from another country or somewhere, or they get this idea and develop themselves, or they create, I don't know.
Sorry, you have to explain a bit more. I don't get your.
You mentioned it. There is an idea in Ubuntu, right? They get this idea is somewhere or some country developing, or this ideas is they created themselves. I don't understand that. If there's a time.
Okay, I think I understand the question. Generally speaking, a culture does not reflect on itself except when it comes into contact with a different culture. If you are living alone with your own culture, there is no reason to reflect on your basic ideas. It's when you come into contact with another culture, you start developing, well, certain people start developing or abstracting out the core values of your culture. This is useful because then the two cultures begin to understand each other, and the prejudice. So I think that's, if you want to say, the Ubuntu idea comes from traditional African culture, and then it's developed and written up by people who have that sort of skill. In the case of South Africa, for example, a cabinet minister approached my colleague, Augustin Schut, to say, please, can you write up an ethical framework for understanding a country which tries to unite these different cultures. So that was a deliberate request to try and formulate these ideas. So.
Thank you.
So we have to thank you, Professor, for the great presentation, and to look forward for your participation at the conference next week. We'll see different perspectives. Some of the participants are from Turkey or Central Asia. So will be a good time for some debates. Now we are looking for debates. Also, John Ozolins will join us. So we have also Australia, not just Europe or South Africa or Asia. So can be an interesting discussion of uncertainty of what is to do based on philosophy as hermeneutics of spirituality, no? And to find solution, maybe I think we can we can offer something, and this we have to develop, to offer something, offer a voice, and this is important, to have a voice, no? Yes. We can have a good voice and better than politicians, no? In some areas where the conflict is very, very hot. There are solutions, always. Yeah. So thank you. We'll keep in touch and see you next week.
Good. Thank